Hello, everyone, and welcome to my talk on making space for different experiences. My name is Aubrey Scott, and I'm a game designer, artist, and programmer passionate about breaking down barriers to entry and helping folks feel seen in the games I make. Whether it's my experiments with onboarding in the tabletop role-playing space during my time at Carnegie Mellon, or the trans-inclusive character creators on the NASCAR Heat series at Monster Games, I make space for people who may not be at the table yet. In my new role as a lead programmer at True Love, it allows me to make space for folks who need a cozy area to get away from the world and be able to have some practices that make them stronger and more whole before they go back out into the world. But today, I want to talk to you about my grant-funded prototype, Goddess Grotto, and the challenges of not only making a different kind of experience, but the extra work of funding, showcasing, and distributing an experience with few mainstream support channels. So Goddess Grotto is a prototype funded by the Minnesota State Arts Board through the 2020 Community Cultural Partnership Grant awarded to me, Aubrey Scott, in partnership with Glitch. The experience sits at the intersection of sex education and art therapy and is inspired by Emily Nagoski's research in her book, Come As You Are. The mobile app asks you to imagine your sexual identity as a garden before choosing a vulva garden bed, which feels good to you. Now, there's a lot of varied vulva garden beds, just like real vulvas out in the world, aim to destigmatizing this sort of section of sexuality for people. The guest is then given an assortment of plants that they can move around in whatever arrangement speaks to them, whether they're trying to satisfy the prompt or whatever calls to them. In an early prototype, guests were given the same prompt, pre-drawn vulvas, and cut out plant stickers and art supplies with similar freedoms. Afterwards, they were asked to describe their gardens and reflect on how they felt after their experience. I was really surprised to find not only the wide variety of vulvas, as you can see here, but also the depth to which people actually engaged with the prompt. They were very intentional about what they made and why. I was worried a little bit that maybe some of this wouldn't carry over into the digital version of the app, but was super surprised and happy to find out that people approach it with similar levels of engagement and curiosity. But some of the folks asked when they could see updates to it and when they could experience it on their own phones. And that was a harder question for me to answer and a challenge that I'd like to explore with all of you. You see, the reason why it's tricky to answer this question is that the right market for this app, I don't believe exists yet. Because of the choice that my wife and I made, who is co-creating the app with me, our choice to make the vulva as a garden bed, it goes against the content policy of the App Store, which doesn't allow for the depiction of genitals in the apps that it approves. In fact, this part of the content policy has been the same since at least 2014, when a cute sex education app featuring a cute vulva mascot taught folks how to taught them how to learn techniques to masturbate. Now, Happy Playtime was unable to find a home in the App Store because of this, and eventually they shifted towards the web experience instead. The Android Play Store is a little bit more lenient and may allow nudity for artistic and educational purposes, but the problem is that if either of these stores are not appropriate, major sections of the mobile market is just unavailable to me. Epic Games is currently pushing they're currently pushing the line for what's actually allowed on iOS. They're trying to make the market a little bit more free in that space. But this is actually them working with an already wildly successful game and a very profitable company that is able to take the time to fight this fight. Small creators are not going to be able to forge these new paths like this. Currently, I'm in contact with folks at Apple and have a conversation going on with them about how the app might need to change in order to be accepted on the App Store. I'm also open to changing parts of the app just for the App Store version and maybe have a more full web version if that's what I have to do in order to get on the store and in front of the customers. Now, this market challenge also creates a significant barrier to funding because without a place to reach that audience for sales, the app can't make any return on investment that we raise. Traditional funding like publishers may be more scarce because of this, and even venture capital funding that is typically available to apps might be less inclined to invest in the app's development. With this in mind, at least for me, it can be really difficult to even commit to exploring a brand new prototype if there is no clear path to market for the app. This is where grant funding came in for me. Grant funding can give game developers the freedom to explore a prototype with very few boundaries before shaping it into something that has to make money right away. Outside the US, grants can fund a significant portion of development, but even in the US, these grants can be used to create working prototypes, which is a vital step towards being able to talk with publishers and investors, which typically require a prototype up front. Now, when I started creating my app, I started wanting to be able to show it to people and be able to talk about the process I was going through to create it. And that's where community comes in. Twitch is a really popular game streaming app. And because of the sensitive nature of the content that's in my app, I figured I would check out their content policy. I found that Twitch doesn't even support nudity for educational or artistic purposes because they have a lack of content filtering, and they cite this as the major reason why they made that decision. This led me to a different platform called Picarto, which has artistic freedom as a core value around which they shaped their content policy. It allows content to be flagged as mature content, and nudity is totally allowed if it's in artistic or educational contexts. Now, being able to market my app, I also struggled to find the right social media for that, but Twitter is a common games platform, I guess, that people have a lot of conversation on. And it's actually a fairly good option for promoting my app because you can mark it as mature content and it will hide your content behind an interstitial warning message that allows guests to kind of opt out if they do not want to consume that kind of content. Instagram felt like a more natural home for me, but because they're partnered up with Facebook, it gets a lot of, or owned by Facebook rather, it gets a lot of their content policies with Facebook, and they don't allow nudity or except for classical art photos or breastfeeding. Their enforcement of this policy seems to be a little bit lax. So it's kind of a gamble about whether I want to build an audience on that platform. It's possible that my content could get taken down eventually. I have seen other folks who have a lot of content around artistic vulvas do really well on there, but as I said, it's kind of a gamble. TikTok, on the other hand, which elevates the wildly popular meme to video format, has been doing really well for creators and bringing people of the younger demographic into the fray. So TikTok allows nudity and sexually explicit content if it's for educational, documentary, scientific, or artistic purposes, very similar to the Android App Store. Now, the last area that I kind of want to survey a little bit is the support that you get from other developers in the community. Most of my developer communities are on Discord through like other game developer networks. And I have some of these through other places like Facebook and a few others, but Discord is like the large like concentration of them for me right now. And they allow you to do not safe for work channels and hide content behind spoiler tags. This has a similar interstitial warning message that comes up and allows communities to really shape their own policies around what they allow and what they don't allow. Now, for me, that meant reaching out to my partner, Glitch, and seeing what their Discord would allow. And while they were already, like I was in the privileged position of already partnering with Glitch, they were really open about all of the policies and interested in shaping them in such a way that my content would be allowed in their spaces. But even with all of that, I had to do the extra work of having those conversations and making spaces that I could connect with other developers, which typically you don't have to take that step if you're doing a more mainstream sort of game that is in less sensitive content spaces. Now that you have a little bit of the lay of the land, let's talk about my own personal choices on Goddess Grotto. I funded my prototype with the Community Cultural Partnership Grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board, who gets a lot of their funding through the National Endowment for the Arts. This allowed me to explore what the app could fully be without feeling like I was wasting my time because I would be creating an artifact through that grant process. It also allowed me to explore the app to the fullest artistic intent and have something concrete to bring to the table later when I'm searching for funding options. Now, partnering with a community organization here in Minnesota, like Glitch, was absolutely wonderful. And I highly recommend it to anybody who is forging new paths to find a organization who matches your values and kind of partner up with them if they can put you in contact with other people and help you run events. They particularly helped me set up the online playtesting event, bringing their playtesting on like away from the physical space and into an online format, and even featured my game and that support and helped connect me to not only their audience, but the audience I was trying to create. Now that I have an app, I was able to take it and I like actually start those conversations with venture capital and possibly publisher funding. Most of these sources require an app up front. And so this process really got me to the place where I can start having some of those conversations of how to push my app into further development. As far as creating community and sharing my creation process and marketing my game, I plan to go with Picarto to share the development process and show some of that on TikTok and Twitter to kind of promote what I'm doing on my app and like the kinds of people who might be interested in coming and seeing what I'm up to. I also did a little bit of work of creating my own audiences. The Coven is a space that is made up of women and non-binary entrepreneurs who, while they don't directly focus on gaming, I imagined that they would be interested in the kind of game that I was making. And so Glitch put me in contact with them and got me set up to run a panel with some of them and talk about not only making games, but making Goddess Grotto and why the folks over there might be interested. And we even had a couple of them come over from that talk, from that panel, and playtest the game during our live event, which was super great to see people not only hear that content, but then come over and actually engage in the app that I was creating. So just remember, your audience may not be in the channels that you're expecting. But from here, my big question is that I'm worried about whether this happens to other traditionally marginalized folks. And my guess is that it does whenever their content may fall outside the mainstream support channels. And so the bigger question is how do we make space for different experiences like this? One way of making space is to actively seek out platforms and services that have more inclusive content policies. You can also check for your games on other platforms that do have inclusive policies and buy on those platforms instead of the normal typical stores that you're used to. It's possible that you could even advocate to get some of those stores to change some of their policies. You can also advocate for safe spaces for different content creators in your community. And this could have a particular focus on different or mature content that can be spoken about in a professional manner that would be safe for everybody involved. Now, when you're creating content policies for your own spaces, push for inclusive policies in your communities that allow for artistic expression and educational content. You can also support funds like the Galaxy Fund that don't require prototypes and give artistic license to the creators. The Galaxy Fund in particular supports Black, Indigenous, people of color, and queer founders who are shaking up the industry and making amazing new content. And finally, you can apply for arts grants and encourage other artists who are pushing boundaries to apply for them as well. I know I personally would not have applied for the Cultural Community Partnership Grant had my friend Ava from Glitch not encouraged me to do so. Thanks, Ava. So in summary, if you're thinking about making something that falls outside the typical channels of your industry, be sure to check out the content policies of not only the market that you're hoping to get into, but also the funding and community sections. Know that whatever limitations you find in the market could affect your funding and how you talk about your app in the social communities. The social communities all have their own content policies, so it may limit where you can actually do that, but that doesn't mean that you can't find spaces that have similar values to you and will support your app. As far as peer-to-peer support, look for places that either already have inclusive policies or maybe even think about forming some of your own that do have inclusive policies. And what I've found in spaces like Glitch is that people flock to places that are inclusive because there aren't a lot of places that approach it in the right way all the time. I'm hoping that my choices that I've shared with you today can help you see some of the other alternative choices that are available to people making content like this. And I want everybody to think about how they may be able to make space for different content and the creators who are pushing boundaries. Encourage your friends who are exploring these new spaces to apply for unconventional funding and different paths for their creations. That's about all the time that I have today to talk to you about this. Once again, I'm Aubrey Scott, and you can find me at Aubrey Jane Scott on Twitter. And thank you for watching my talk. Have a wonderful day.